Please come to order, council. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mandy, could you please call the roll?
DeYoung.
Here.
Branderhorst.
Here.
Banstruck.
Here.
Hopkins.
Here.
Spore.
Here.
And Skibout is absent.
All right, thank you. So those of you attending by the telephone, you will have an opportunity to provide verbal comments during the dedicated public forums. I would ask that to please keep your microphones or telephones on mute until the time that you wish to speak. Can I get a motion for approval of the tentative agenda?
So moved.
Support.
Banstra, Branderhorst, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Banstruck.
Yes.
Branderhorst.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Motion passed. All right, anyone wishing to address council regarding an agenda item, the time to do that is now. If you would please come forward, state your name and address at the podium. Try to limit your comments to 3 minutes. Okay, seeing none, we'll move along. Can I get a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Support.
DeYoung, Branderhorst, discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Branderhorst.
Yes.
Banstruck.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
Motion passed. Okay, moving on to petitions and communications. We're considering a special event permit request for Kirschmarkt, Dutch Christmas Market. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to explain this item. I'd like to direct the Mayor and Council's attention to the big board for a short presentation on this item. As Mayor Dewar stated, tonight's request comes to us from the CVB, and specifically they're looking to operate the Christmas market on December 2nd through December 4th of this year. We do have a description up on slide number 2 of the various events that would be associated with the market. It is important to note that this would be conducted in the Molengrop Plaza. So let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Okay. It is important to note that as a part of this event, the CVB is requesting to close one parking spot on the west side of the 700 block at East First Street. That would be next to the Royal Amsterdam Hotel. And it is important to note, Mr. Mayor, that all pertinent city departments have reviewed the application, that the insurance certificate have been received, and staff is recommending approval this evening. So with that, we'd be more than happy to answer any questions the Mayor or Council may have on this item.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved. Support.
Branderhorst, DeYoung, discussion, questions? How many vendors are there, Jill?
There are 10 merchandise and 6 food vendors to start for this year.
Okay. All right, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Branderhorst.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Banstruck.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on to resolution number 6352, entitled Resolution Temporarily Closing Public Ways or Grounds in connection with a special event known as Kirschmarkt Dutch Christmas Market. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Support.
Was that Hopkins, Spore? I'm sure nothing to add, right, Mike?
You are correct, Mr. Mayor.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Branderhorst.
Yes.
Banstruck.
Yes.
Motion passed. Considering a temporary outdoor service extension on a Class C liquor license for Liberty Street Kitchen. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, once again, I'd be happy to explain this item. I'd like to direct everyone's attention to the big board for this item. Tonight's request comes to us from the Liberty Street Kitchen. It is for a temporary outdoor service extension to the Class C liquor license. And again, they are planning on serving during the Christmas market. And this request comes to us tonight for the time period of December 2nd through the 5th. And as we stated, the purpose of this is to serve beverages during the Christmas market, special events permit. It is important to note that the application has been completed online with the state of Iowa, and staff is recommending approval this evening. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to answer any questions the Mayor and Council may have on
Thanks, Mike. Can I get a motion for approval?
So moved.
Vanderhorst, Hopkins, any discussion? All right, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Vanderhorst,
Yes.
Hopkins,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
DeYoung,
Yes.
DeAnstruck.
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on to ordinance number 9.
I'm having problems with the phone, so I'm going to try to redial it.
Welcome to Join Me. Please enter your conference ID and press the pound key. You will now be placed into the conference.
So we good to go?
Yep,
All right.
okay.
Considering ordinance number 999, entitled an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance of the City of Pella, Iowa by conditionally amending the boundaries of the R3 district to include the property generally located south of Boss Landon Drive at Utrecht Lawn, and directing the planning and zoning director to note the ordinance number and date of this change on the official zoning map. This is the second reading of this ordinance. Mike?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to explain this item. For those following at home, I'm on slide number 5 this evening. And tonight's request comes to us from Ray Property Management, and it is important to note that this rezoning request is a conditional rezoning request. And as Mayor DeWard stated, it's roughly for about a 2.5 acre parcel that's just south of Boss Landon Drive. And up on the big board we have here, you can see the highlighted area of the parcel in question that we have here, 2.5 acres just south of Boss Landon Drive. I believe the Grand Stay Hotel is located right over here. So let's go ahead, please, Mandy. What you see of this next exhibit that we have, rather, is the current zoning map that we have up on the big board. And it is important to note that the current property is zoned A1 Ag, and that is intended for agricultural. And that was the property or the zoning when the golf course was built there, and it is, golf courses are allowed in the A1 zoning district as well. Now, we are going to be considering a request. This specific request, rather, is for R3, but it is a conditional R3 rezoning request. And so R3 is intended for multifamily housing. And as you can see, anytime you look at the zoning map, you always want to make sure that there's other zoning that's identified that's associated with it in close proximity, which we do believe is the case with the R3 zoning on Boss Landon Drive that currently is in place. So let's go ahead, please, Mandy. Now, it's very important to note, as we stated earlier, this is a conditional rezoning request, which means that the property owner has voluntarily waived some uses that would normally be allowed into R3. The reason for the conditional rezoning request is just for land use compatibility with the surrounding properties that we are considering. So when we look at this particular request, with it, the uses that would not be allowed are listed up here on item number 1. And then also to lower the density on the 2.5 acre parcel, we've also eliminated townhomes and multifamily housing units are not allowed. So basically what you have is single family attached, and duplexes on this. So be 1 and 2 family parcels on there, and the density that you're probably most likely looking at in development such as this, by the time you count in the setback area, is somewhere right around 8 to 10 acres, 8 to 10 units per acre, which we would classify as a medium to low density residential, which we feel is appropriate for the proposed location. Let's go ahead, please, Mandy. I would also be remiss if I didn't say I'm moving a little bit too fast this evening, that the developer has also agreed to design standards for the buildings as well. So please keep that in mind as we consider action on this particular item. Now, as the council is well aware, but maybe for members in the audience or if you're following at home, anytime we do have a rezoning action, one of the first things that we use as a guide is we look to seek guidance from the city's comprehensive plan. Whenever you hear terminology such as conformance with the comprehensive plan, we are talking about conformance with the entire document. So if you hear conformance, we want to make sure we have conformance with the comprehensive plan. We're alluding to the entire document. Now, as far as the city's comprehensive plan, it is approximately 147 pages, and there's lots of items in the comprehensive plan. 2 items that usually catch the attention anytime we talk about conformity with the comprehensive plan and rezoning request. We always want to take a look at the future use land map. The future use land map identifies this particular parcel for medium density residential on there, which we believe, if you look at the conditional rezoning, that 8 to 10 units per acre is somewhere between low and medium density. So from a density standpoint, we believe we align with the future use land map. It is important also to note that you also have to take a look at the strategic priorities of the city's comprehensive plan. And as council is well aware, one of the main goals of the city's comprehensive plan was additional housing for our community. In fact, housing was identified as a shortage in the community. The comprehensive plan went on to state that it recommended strategies for the city to attract additional housing for the community. The developer is proposing additional housing, which is needed in our community. We believe this request aligns with the key strategic priority of the comprehensive plan. We also believe it aligns with the future use land map. The last thing on a high-level overview that we review in making decisions or making recommendations on conformity with the city's comprehensive plan is we always take a strong look at the land use compatibility matrix. And if you recall, when we looked at the zoning of the particular parcel surrounding it, we basically have identified that this parcel with the conditional rezoning is compatible with the neighboring properties as far as the land use compatibility matrix as stated in the city's comprehensive plan. So based on our review, Mr. Mayor, we do believe the rezoning request is in conformity and aligns with the city's comprehensive plan. Mandy, let's go ahead, please. Now, just a little bit, this is the future use land map that you can see out there. And again, when you look at the area surrounding the area in question is the purple area. And I believe we've covered a lot of this territory that's listed on this slide here. So Mandy, let's go ahead, please. Now, from our recommendation, we believe that the proposed rezoning aligns with the city's comprehensive plan. We also believe, since it is a conditional rezoning, that it addresses any potential land use compatibility issues that could exist in the neighborhood, both from a density standpoint, and we also believe that the design of the buildings will closely align with the structures that you see in the Boss London development as well. And as a result, Mr. Mayor, we are recommending approval of this rezoning request this evening. It is important to note that the Planning and Zoning Commission did review this request on their September 27th meeting and unanimously approved the ordinance that we are considering this evening. So with that, that concludes the staff presentation. We'd be more than happy to answer any questions the mayor or council may have on this item.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Mandy, could you go back to the zoning that showed all the zoning along that road? I want to say this, Rave Properties is owned by Councilman Hopkins, and as he was referred to in our last meeting, Don's brother, who has a name, and it's Roger. So I would appreciate if people want to talk about my brother, you at least give his name. I know that doesn't push the narrative quite as well, that there's something special going on here for these people. But note that R3 is all along that road. So what's going to be built there will look exactly like what's all along the road. So I don't want anybody to think that anybody's getting any special treatment here because it's a council member and the other partner is Roger DeWard. So there's nothing to that if any kind of special treatment here. So now I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
DeYoung, Spore, any discussion? All right, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
DeYoung,
Yes.
Spore,
Yes.
Vanderhorst,
Yes.
DeAnstrup,
Yes.
Hopkins.
Motion passed. All right, moving on to claims, abstract bills number 2089. Do I have a motion for approval?
Move to approve and issue warrants.
Vanderhorst,
Support.
DeYoung, any discussion, questions? All right, all in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Vanderhorst,
Yes.
DeYoung,
Yes.
DeAnstrup,
Yes.
Hopkins,
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
Motion passed. All right, any council member have any other business that you would like us to address tonight? Okay, any member of the public have any issues you'd like to bring before council tonight? If you do, please come forward, state your name and address, and try to limit your comments to 3 minutes if possible. All right, then there's a couple things I'd like to address. So unless you've been locked up in your house for the last while, if you get out into this community, there's a lot of things going on. If you drive around, you can see from east to west a whole lot of activity going on. And I have been very, very vocal and supportive of growth within Pella. So when I say that, I hear from people that don't want growth. They want their, people grew up in Pella as a small little town and they want it to stay that way. So when they email me that's a great discussion to have. That's an opportunity for debate, Should we try to grow this community or should we try to keep it the way it is? And so I like those kind of discussions. The other thing that I've been very active in is having the city be proactive in trying to help some of this stuff happen. Again, I hear from people that say that's not the city's role. Hey, fine. That's a debate we can have. And I'm sure whoever wants to disagree with me has reasons why. I've got reasons why. But there's also a tremendous amount of misinformation that's going on out there. And so that's going on one of two ways. One way is that someone just doesn't understand how some of these things work. Hey, that's okay. It's our responsibility to educate the public so that people understand. The other is that it's being told by someone that knows the truth but decides they'd rather not tell the truth. So that's pretty disheartening to me. If you want to have a debate, let's have a debate. Don't go out there spreading false information about projects or things like that are not true and you know they're not true. So the other thing that's really disheartening to me is as I listen to some of the forums and some of the discussion, suddenly the Pella Corporation and the Pella Corporation family through RDP and GenLink have become evil. Somehow they're trying to take advantage of this community. I've lived here for 41 years, 42 years actually. I can't think of anybody that's done more for this community than the Pella Corporation and the Pella family. So I've invited Stan Van Wyk to come tonight and just talk a little bit about what the motive is and what they're doing because they need to be able to defend themselves to some of this stuff that's going on. So I'm inviting Stan to speak, and Stan, you can have as much time as you need.
All right, thanks, Don. Man, you want to flip the lights? I'm 50 years old. I didn't bring my readers.
I have a pair here if you would like them.
I think I'll be okay. All right, Stan Van Wyk, 2622 Himmel Drive here in Pella. I've lived in Pella my entire life. I went to Central College. I raised my family in Pella. My parents and my grandparents were also raised in the Pella area. I wasn't going to mention this, but I do know a little bit of Dutch. Calvin Banch and I have a chance to talk once in a while and share some of our phrases. I know enough to count to 10, ask you how you're doing, talk a little bit about the weather, and maybe even curse at you a few times. And the only thing that rivals my pride in the community of Pella is the pride that I have in having 25 years of experience working for Pella Corporation and the Sherrill family. I'm here tonight to provide information regarding investments that the entire Sherrill family is making in the community. The family typically prefers to stay in the background. They don't look to take credit for all the things that they're doing behind the scenes. However, due to the misinformation and confusion, I reluctantly ask the family to breach their confidentiality and share facts with you today. GenLink and RDP Holdings are two entities that have been subject of confusion and misinformation. I am the CEO of GenLink, which is a family office that supports the shareholders of Pella Corporation. And I'm a manager of RDP Holdings. RDP Holdings is an entity created by the family, owned 100% by the family, for the purpose of facilitating community investments. Some of you may be wondering why the Pella Sherrill family is investing in the community. They don't even live here, right? I can assure you, the family, many of who were born and raised in Pella, cares deeply about, and has a very vested interest in this community and its future. It's where Pella Corporation team members have lived, worked, volunteered, and contributed in a multitude of ways for over 95 years. Being a part of this special community is a source of pride for the family, for the community, and for its extraordinary team members. In February of 2018, Tim Yegi, Pella's current president and CEO, came to Pella shareholders and expressed an urgent need to invest in the community. The purpose of these investments was to enable the company to attract and retain the talent necessary to support growth required to compete in a highly competitive industry. Let me say that again. The purpose of these investments was to enable the company to attract and retain the talent necessary to compete in a highly competitive industry. Over the past decade, Pella Corporation has far outpaced the population growth of our community. Growth is necessary for the health of the business and to ensure a sustainable future for our team members and the communities in which they live. Rather than place this initiative within Pella Corporation, it was decided to leverage GenLink, the family office, to drive these investments. Based on discussions with community leaders, other large employers, and focus groups, it was determined the primary areas of focus would be housing, childcare, and amenities. In the past 3 years, over $20 million net of any incentives or any anticipated return of capital has been poured into this community to ensure the community can support the company's continued growth. That is $20 million paid directly out of the pockets of our shareholders with no expectation of return other than making Pella a better place to live and work so that Pella Corporation can attract and retain the talent necessary to keep its headquarters in Pella. In addition, the Pella shareholders have committed to taking a percentage of company profits available for dividends and retained earnings each year to invest in the community on an ongoing basis to create a sustainable funding structure. Keep in mind, these are not company funds, but rather represent reinvestment of shareholder capital into the community. This has no impact on the company's profitability or team members' compensation. And note, this is also in addition to philanthropic efforts through the Roll Screen and Kuiper Foundations. This sends a strong message regarding Pella shareholder family's commitment to keeping its Pella headquarters here in Pella. Projects that have been completed or in process include, but are not limited to, Liberty Street Kitchen, South Main Housing Development, Prairie Ridge Housing Development, Prairie Ridge Commercial Development, which is where Smash Park will be located, combining the Kinder Heights and Early Learning Center, along with significant remodel of the PRC facility that will provide fully accredited child care for 194 children, a major upgrade at PRC Fitness Center, which just recently reopened, Main Street Market, as well as remodeling of homes at 307 Main Street and 515 Broadway. And I can assure you, there is more to come. One project that's been subject of miscommunication is Smash Park. Luke Ballinger, who grew up in Pella, approached the City of Pella, GenLink, as well as the Vermeer family about wanting to invest in bringing a Smash Park to Pella. This was a great example of cooperation between the City of Pella, the Pella shareholder family, and the Vermeer family. The city approved financial incentives. RDP Holdings sold 4.3 acres to Smash Park for $1, and the Vermeer family also contributed financial support. RDP Holdings is mentioned in the development agreement as receiving incentives. However, that is only because RDP Holdings own the land. Any incentives received by RDP Holdings from the city related to Smash Park will be given to Smash Park. This is the way the agreement was structured from the beginning. RDP Holdings contributed to the project by essentially giving away the commercial land. You may recall from the press release, Smash Park also plans to open and expand to Omaha, Minneapolis, Salt Lake City, and Phoenix. Based on that list, I think most people would understand why incentives that will be given to Smash Park as seed money were necessary to attract this exciting new amenity to Pella. And I am proud to have been a small part of that great accomplishment. Forgive me for repeating myself, but the return on all the community investments I just mentioned from a financial perspective will be negative. Thank goodness that isn't how the family measures success. Rather, success is measured in terms of making Pella a better place to live and work, and the ability to attract and retain talent, and spurring other investments in the community. And by those measures, we are having success. Some people have claimed that these projects are being funded on the backs of Pella's taxpayers. I will defer to Mike Nardini, the mayor, and the city council, but my understanding is that all the projects have a positive financial impact on the community and the taxpayers. Any incentives that have been or will be funded, will be received by us, have been funded by property taxes coming from increased assessed values driven by the projects themselves. Thus, if the project never happened, the property taxes used to fund the incentives simply would not exist. Finally, I appreciate and understand the need to stay anchored in our heritage and our Dutch roots. There is great merit in preserving the character of our town and not underestimating the impact it has on tourism, as well as what it means to those of us who have been here our whole lives and those who have moved to Pella and embraced our heritage. Over the past few years, the Pella family has provided significant financial support to the Pella Historical Society, the Pella Opera House, Pella Christian and Pella Community Schools, Central College, the Wanderspiel and Playground, which just had its grand opening last weekend, and many other community organizations through the Roll Screen and Kuiper Foundations. The challenge is to strike a balance in bringing modern amenities and economic development to support our large employers without sacrificing the character of our town. With the right leadership, this can certainly be accomplished. On behalf of the Pella shareholder family, and myself personally, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the mayor and the council for their leadership and their service. I'm sure there are times where you feel unappreciated and maybe even disrespected. I want you to know that I respect each of you and believe that you are all fulfilling your role to the best of your abilities. And with that, I will leave you with the following story. Pella Corporation was founded in 1925, originally as Roll Screen, and was located in Des Moines, Iowa. Pete Kuiper commuted from Pella to Des Moines, and after a year of expanding production, the company had outgrown its original factory. In 1926, Pete wrote a letter to Pella's Chamber of Commerce to propose moving his business to Pella. Though he was eager to relocate the company to his hometown, he had no intention of bringing jobs to the community without financial consideration in return. Those considerations included a new plant to be built by the city and rented by Roll Screen for 5 years before purchasing, a $1,000 grant for moving expenses, an exemption from city and school taxes for 5 years. After careful consideration, the Chamber unanimously approved the proposal, and as they say, the rest is history. If not for the foresight of those community leaders, Pella would not be the place it is today that so many of us love and appreciate. I would like to thank you for your time. If anyone has any additional questions about GenLink or RDP Holdings or any of the projects we are working on, my office is above the window store on the Mullengraben. Feel free to come and see me, and thank you.
Thanks, Dan. And somehow these people are being portrayed as the bad guys. That's a long stretch for me. I want to touch on something that Stan said, and I've seen this in print, so I know that the story's out there, that the projects that we're involved in are somehow being, people are making money off that on the backs of the taxpayers. So I'm going to take the time to go through all the projects that are happening right now that the city's involved in to dispel that myth, if it's a myth, or a lie, if it's a lie. Because from some people's mouths it's a lie, from other people's mouths it might be just a misunderstanding of how things work. So indulge me a second. I'll start with the Laylee Urban Renewal Project. And if you've driven on to the east on 163, See to the south, Laylee is building a new North American headquarters there. The cost of that new facility is $16 million. The City of Pella, in order for them to build out there, we need to extend a water main, construct a lift station, and associated force main, and upgrade the road out in front of there. So how we funded that as a city is we issued a bond, a 20-year general obligation bond in the amount of $2,025,000 at an interest rate of 1.66%, which is unprecedented in the history of anywhere. But the question is, how is that bond going to be paid back? Is it going to be paid back by the taxpayers of Pella? No. It's being paid back by Laylee, because they've agreed to an $8 million minimum assessment agreement. And based on that assessed value, the TIF revenue, and I should try to explain TIF, but I'm not going to go that deep into it. Just trust me that the TIF revenue from this new development, the $8 million minimum assessment, will pay back every dollar of principal and interest on that bond. And think of this, that's a 65-acre piece that Laylee bought out there. They're going to use, I believe, 15 of it or 20 of it for their campus. And so now we've got all this industrial site ready to go. And you know what? If anything else comes out there, if any other businesses relocate there, and I think Laylee has plans or has talked to other people that might come there, we will be able to, as a city, we will be able to capture all of that TIF from any other development that happens out there. So the $8 million minimum is sufficient to take care of what our investment is. Anything we get over and above that is going to be extra money. And I'm going to show you what that means in real dollars pretty soon. The second one, Boss Ridge and Boss Land and Estates. Boss Ridge development along the road out there past the golf course. Boss Estates is inside of Boss Landing. I don't know if anybody's been driven out there, but Boss Ridge is filling up quickly. Boss Land and Estates, the vintage estates are almost done. There's 4 new houses that are already being built on lots that were created through this. So the city approved $4.1 million of TIF revenue rebates for these 2 projects. The total cost of the infrastructure to get these 2 projects was estimated at $4.8 million. And so what that means is for the next 15 years, all the property tax paid by those 2 developments only, nobody else in Pella. So if you buy a house in Boss Ridge, you buy a vintage estate, your property tax, the TIF portion of your property tax are going to go back to the developer as a rebate. But one of the other neat things about this for us as a community is there's this what's called LMI, low to moderate income. And so 36% of all of that TIF revenue is going to go into a fund that the City of Pella will have to use for housing initiatives in other parts of the community. So tell me how that's a bad deal. And the developer only gets whatever money's paid, not one dime more over the next 15 years. So based on how fast it builds and how fast it develops, that's what the developer is going to get, not one penny more than that. So every dollar of incentive that goes back to the developer comes from those developments and nowhere else. Okay? Prairie Ridge residential development. It's 93 lots with approximately 25 condo townhouse development on the west edge of town. Now, this is the greatest deal the City of Pella has ever gotten. There was $4.7 million of infrastructure cost to get that project, to build the streets, put in the sewer, and all of that. $4.7 million. City of Pella didn't give one dime to that. Marion County reimbursed the developer for that. Because Marion County also understands exactly what Stan was talking about, how critical it is for us as a community to grow people, because we need people for the kind of jobs that we have. Marion County understands that. They stepped up to the plate and they said, you know what, we want to be involved in this project. We will reimburse for the infrastructure. They did the same thing on a project in Knoxville, because they get it. There's leadership there that gets it, what we're going to need. So that whole thing didn't cost us one dime. And the county will recapture their investment through the same type of TIF arrangement as we have in Boss Ridge and Boss Estates. They're going to collect the property taxes off of that, those houses that are built out there, the TIF part of the property tax. They're going to be able to use it because they floated a bond to pay for that. They'll retire that. All we are is a conduit for the money. The city had to be involved because it's inside the city limits. The specs required that all the infrastructure be built to city specs. Once that was done, they dedicated it to the city. So there are streets now. It's our streets, it's our lift station, it's our sewer out there, City of Pella. We didn't invest anything into that project. Prairie Ridge Commercial Development, which Stan mentioned, the Smash Park, and then also later a fast casual restaurant were part of this. So the city has pledged $4 million to that project in incentives. So when the day the Smash Park opens, it's built and open, the city will issue a bond and give that bond to, as Stan said, to GenLink, who in turn is going to give it to Smash Park. When the restaurant is done, there's another $500,000 of TIF of bond that will go directly into that part of the project. And then after the $2 million bonds are paid off down the road, projections are it'll be 10 or 11, maybe 12 years to pay it off. Then GenLink will get up to $2 million of TIF rebate at that point in time. So how are we paying for that? Well, the developer has agreed to a $7 million minimum assessment agreement. And so that will be sufficient. That will generate enough TIF revenue to pay the bond and pay the interest on the bond. And so nobody else anywhere in town is going to be supporting that project. Every dime that it goes into that project's going to come back from the project. So the owners of Smash Park have agreed to a certain minimum assessment agreement. The restaurant is going to agree to a certain minimum assessment. They're going to pay property tax. The TIF portion of that property tax will pay the bond back. City of Pella, no money comes from anywhere else for those incentives. Now, we will as a city, and so full disclosure, so nobody can say I didn't tell you everything, we will be putting a turning lane and signals at the intersection out there. That's going to cost $300,000. Those funds are going to come from the city's share of the federal gas tax and any future TIF revenues from the development. Because again, like the Laylee project, if you don't think having a Smash Park and a restaurant is going to attract other business, then you just don't know how business works. Because there's going to be more businesses going to come into that area, into that urban renewal area. And when they do, the city can capture all of the TIF revenue to be used somewhere else. Because what we are guaranteed is going there is sufficient to take care of the incentives that are in the project. Okay, let's see. I got two more. South Main. South Main is a housing development down where the old school was, and that was another TIF rebate, same as the Boss Ridge. Up to $6.1 million of TIF money can be rebated to the developer over the next 20 years, and that works exactly the same. The only people The only people that are gonna pay for any of these incentives are the people that buy and live in those units. And everybody that buys buys a unit there knows before they buy it that there's a minimum assessed value on that piece of property. Because there's agreed minimum assessed value, so that over time, the developer can potentially get 6.1. Again, not one other taxpayer contributes $1 to any incentive off of that project. That project is whatever that project produces, that's what the developer is allowed to get back from. And look at it this way. Think about what that used to look like, that property. It was deemed a blighted area. When this project's done, we're talking $16.5 million of development. If that isn't good for this community, then, you know, I give up. I can't think of a better use for that property than what's going to be there. So, last but not least, the Pella Market, which is directly across north to the of the South Main. And you see some construction happening there. Again, that's the same type of arrangement. There's incentives back to the developers, TIF rebate. So we got to remember, in the Laylee and the Prairie Ridge commercial, we actually are putting upfront money in, and we're going to get paid back through TIF. These two projects, South Main and Pella Market, the incentive money only comes back when the property tax is paid. So there's no money put up front. It comes back as the property tax is paid. And so in the case of the market itself is going to rebate its own property tax. And again, it's a $5 million development there. So there's no other taxpayer in Pella that contributes anything to any incentive on that project. I think we all benefit as a community from what the development is there. So those are all the current projects. And you know what? Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot the Vermeer campus rebuild. My mistake. I don't want to forget that. As you know, Vermeer had a tornado take out a couple buildings. They went ahead and invested in our community into an unbelievable new building. If you didn't get a chance to see it at their open house, it's hard to describe because it's an unbelievable facility. But that new building created new valuation. And so we don't feel like Vermeer should be penalized because of the storm taking out some older buildings being replaced with a new. So there's some rebate or what's the word? Abatement, property tax abatement in that situation, so that they're not penalized for the additional investment they've made. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, it's taxes we won't collect, or we wouldn't have collected anyway if they hadn't had what happened. The new valuation is there. So what do you think? So those are all the current projects that the City of Pella is involved in, and there's all kinds of other stuff going on that we aren't involved in. But this adds up to $130 million of development. We're a town of 10,500 people. And we've got 100, and again, this isn't all of it, because there's a lot of other stuff going on. $130 million of development. I have been to a lot of towns in Iowa of 10,000 people, and they haven't had $130 million of developments in the last 130 years. And so we have something very special here. And for us to, make stuff up about how this is all happening, it's just appalling to me. Now, you might ask, what's our history with these kind of things? Because this is the good part. This is fun. So, we've had this before. We've done this before. 22 years ago, we had a pretty forth vision visionary council and mayor, and they said, hey, we need to do some things to spur some development. So in 2009, the Mollengrat development happened, and that was and I was a 20% owner in the private part of that development. So that's 22 years ago. So I was not thinking about running it for mayor at that point. Anyway, so that was a partnership between the City of Pella and private development. The City of Pella put $4 million into that project to construct the parking garage and construct the plaza area in the canal. The private side of that, we built all of those buildings. There's 3-story buildings there, because in order to make it work for the city, we had to get to a valuation that would support that $4 million investment. So we had to agree to a $10.5 million minimum assessment agreement, which at the time was going to pay for the bond that was issued. So that was done. That one's done. It's expired. The bond's paid off. That urban renewal, and the great thing about TIF is it spurs development. This wouldn't have happened. I guarantee you that project would not have happened without the city doing what they did. But now that there's let's see, I think Mike gave me the number. There's $16.9 million of value there now. And guess where all the property tax that's paid on all of that is going? To the county, to the school, to the city. So we had to wait 20 years because in the 20-year period, the TIF part of the taxes went to pay the bond off. But now that development is going right into the same property tax rolls as every other piece of property. So the West Interchange, urban renewal, located on the western edge of community near exit 40. This area includes Ulrich Ford, Casey's, Friendship Village, and American. This one is also expired. This one's over 20 years old. It expired in 2018. It generated $40 million of development, that part of the project. And so the city issued TIF rebates on that project to the developer to help spur development there. The Walmart commercial urban renewal, that expires in 2028. That's still going. $29.2 million of valuation, and the City of Pella got a pretty good deal on this. Constructed traffic lights, spent approximately $400,000 on this one. The South Gate, which is the south, you guys know where that is. That TIF district expired in 2020. The City of Pella reimbursed the developer at that time $1.6 million for the cost of the Roosevelt Road extension. And again, that $1.6 million was paid for with TIF. No taxpayer in Pella had contributed anything to take care of that. So this smartly, and I give Mike credit, all of those TIF districts were combined into one TIF district. And coincidentally, and I didn't know this till I started going through this, but guess what the amount of development added up to for all of those projects? $130 million, just like we have $130 million going today. But here's the real good part about all of this and why it's a wise investment for the city to be involved in these projects. That project that was 20 years ago, since it's been, and as I said, as more development happened, the city's been able to capture the extra TIF along the way. $9 million, that TIF project, those TIF projects, and linking them all together, generated $9 million of excess TIF for the City of Pella. Where's that money gone? Does anybody remember the North Main Street renovation here a few years ago where the new street was put on Main Street? $1.7 million TIF revenue paid for that. Does anybody remember the Washington Street improvement where Washington was redone a few years ago, 2.2 million came from TIF revenue. Oskaloosa Street reconstruction, 1.95 million. Central Business District's improvements, 1.6 million. We just extended a bigger water main out to Fifield to have better water supply for development out on the west end of town, $1 million. And the south water main improvements, $500,000. So $9 million. That's $9 million that would have had to have been paid by the taxpayers. But because the city did these projects, TIF revenue covered all of the cost of all of those projects. So I can only imagine what the new round of TIF projects that we have going, what kind of excess TIF revenue we're going to be able to get, and how we can use that to fund a lot of projects around town. So I'm incredibly excited about the development that's going on. It's quite a list, and as Stan said, there's more to come, and I believe there's more to come too. So thank you for indulging me. I wanted to make sure and set the record straight so that there's a lot of misinformation floating around the community. And all I'm looking for is the truth. I want the truth to be out there. If you know the truth and you don't agree with me, great. Let's have a discussion. Let's have a debate. Debate's great. And I'm not gonna argue with lies and misinformation. So, all right, we're gonna move on to our. We're gonna adjourn to policy and planning sessions to discuss which one we're doing first. Sign regulations.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What we're here to talk about is 2 potential sign code amendments, and specifically what we're looking on both of these items tonight is just to simply review these items, direct the Planning and Zoning Commission to look at both of these items. The first item here, we're going to spend our initial part of the meeting on the first item, comes to us tonight from Laylee, and this is associated with their new North American corporate headquarters project, and specifically if you were to drive by the building, it's a wonderful facility. It's going to provide additional employment opportunities in our community, and as Mayor Ward stated, hopefully additional development within our community as well. The issue that we've had is under the city sign code, and I wouldn't say had, it's things come up during the development process. But specifically, this deals with what is the allowable sign under the city sign code. And what we have here under this first component here is under the city sign code, if you keep these items in mind, is the city's zoning code allows 1 freestanding ground mount sign when it's located 100 feet from a public right of way. And please keep in mind that the maximum square footage on that site is 45 square feet. Now, Mandy, if we could skip these second and third bullet points and go to the next slide, please, for me, I would appreciate it. This is the sign that Laylee would like to put up at their new corporate headquarters when it opens up next spring. And it's from their background in the Netherlands, these types of signs are very common in the Netherlands on it. Maximum, the key issue is, if you recall, when we said that under our sign code, we'd allow 45 square feet. The sign that you're looking at is over 200 square feet in diameter on it. Now, what I would say on this, just because the code has a limited value on it, does not mean it's improper. It was done at the time, and not knowing what could be in the future and where this is located. But as we consider potential sign code amendments, you got to keep in mind that this building is located on exit 44. It's directly on Highway 163. So what may not be appropriate in town may very well be appropriate at the bypass. And Mandy, let's go ahead, please, if we could, to our next slide on that. No, I guess I'm a little bit off. And so what we have here is, if you were to look at various cities up here and what they allow, you'll see in that list that some of the cities that abut Interstate 80 and on the interstates, they do allow signs such as what Laylee is proposing. So we would simply state, or would like to request, is to direct the Planning and Zoning Commission to look at this item and look at the request from Laylee, and make sure that if we consider this, that it could be a value for potential Laylee development, potentially others, but specifically where we are geared, the conversation would be for those entities that are abut Highway 163 on it and potentially consider a sign code amendment which would allow a sign that's similar to what Laylee is proposing. But again, this would be done at the Planning and Zoning Commission level. And I'll state for the record, anytime you look at sign code, and one of the items you're hearing me say is the key thing is always the law of unintended consequences. And so it seems like a very simple request to look at. There's a lot to look at here. We need to make sure at the Planning and Zoning Commission level we do due diligence, and we look at potential amendments and what could potentially happen under the city sign code. And so that's one item that we would like to have referred back to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And again, city staff is not making a recommendation on this, but we feel it's appropriate to be directed to the Planning and Zoning Commission for due consideration of this item. And so before we go on to our next item for the Planning and Zoning Commission, is there any questions on the Laylee proposed sign or the potential sign code amendment that we would be considering?
Could you go back to the picture of the Laylee sign, please? And that, what you're looking at is back in the background, right?
Mm-hmm.
That part. With the size part, do we have any other signs that are smaller than that but still that same style that are out? Because that looks very unique to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess very attractive.
Yeah, and I see Jerry is shaking his head back there, so we're not aware of any.
Okay.
So just so I'm clear, you're talking about a code amendment, not a variance to the code.
That's correct. That's correct, Mr. Mayor. We're looking at a code amendment that would be done to the city sign code.
Don't mind dumping it on them. Wish them well. I remember us going round and round and round when that Casey's was built on Clark Street.
Yeah.
They wanted to put a great big sign way up in the air.
Hold that thought. Okay, so that would be one item. And again, the reason we want to start off the Planning and Zoning Commission, because if council were to amend the sign code and allow it, what would be required is a public hearing at the Planning and Zoning Commission level. We'd also have a public hearing at the City Council level, and the Planning and Zoning Commission would have to make a recommendation anyway to the City Council. And I can attest, after serving many years on the Planning and Zoning Commission, they're very good at getting in the weeds on things like that, and that's kind of their specialty. So we'd like to direct this item to them. Mandy, let's go back to our first slide. Now, what I want to say, and I'm hesitant on bringing this up, but we just want to make sure that we have the discussion, and we want to talk about pole signs. Now, under the city sign code, there is a provision that allows pole signs, and it's on the Highway 163 again, and it's for signs for locations that are within 1,600 feet radius of Highway 163 interchanges. Originally, what this was done was back in 2004, the thought was that businesses need to be advertised their product. We need to make sure the visitors get to the business location. And at the time, we made provisions under the city code that would allow for up to a 60-foot tall pole sign, 180 square feet in diameter and square footage for the sign. Since 2004, there have been two signs that have fell under this provision. One is at Casey's and one is at Dairy Queen. The tallest sign that we have is 40 feet in height. And from our perspective, what we think it was passed in 2004, and since we're reviewing kind of bypass signage in this general area, we think it makes sense to make sure that we look at the height and make sure that this is still applicable and that's still something that we deem as necessary. And while we're asking the question to the Planning and Zoning Commission on ground sign and maximum sign area, we think it makes sense to also at least have a conversation with the commission and make sure this is still applicable and still meets the mark on what we have. And so we'd like to refer this item back, and just if not, we don't have a recommendation either way, but specifically we want to make sure that the 60-foot height is still deemed necessary, because what we've had since 2004 is two applications for two signs that are maximum of 40 feet in height. And so again, the question would just simply be, is the 60-foot applicable? Is it still reasonable? Do we still need to have it? That would be the question to ask back to the commission and get their thoughts on it. How this process would work is once there was a consensus or a recommendation on this is what we think we should do on both of these items, what we would do is we'd come back to the council and we'd share the commission's thoughts on it, make sure we're all on the same page when we get the direction from council what we'd want to do at that time. And likely the direction would be, should we consider a formal zoning code amendment for both these items, or maybe there's no recommendation for this end. The commission that could come back and say no changes to the city's sign code. So before we got there, before there was a formal ordinance presented to the city council, there'd be that communication back to the council and with direct input from the planning and zoning commission. So all we're simply asking is for the Laylee sign, and this would not just be for Laylee, this would be for anybody that would be on Highway 163, look at that type of signage on Highway 163. And two, we'd want to take a look at the height on these signage to make sure that we're still applicable for the 60-foot height. And so those are the two items that we have, Mr. Mayor.
So the 60-foot height, the reviewing that would be just because no one's used it yet, or?
Well, yeah, I guess to answer the question, I will say this, there's thoughts on staff level that if the 60-foot high sign was built and it looked inappropriate, that may be an item for council. Or it would be voiced as a concern in the future, and that's one item that we would say. And I would also say when you look at the Dairy Queen and Casey's sign, I think they're very well proportioned and they look appropriate at the location. And I think from the staff standpoint, the staff's level is there's some hesitancy with allowing a 60-foot high sign that may not be appropriate. And so that's why we're asking the question. And in full disclosure, we asked the question again in 2004, and at that time the recommendation was no changes to the city sign code. So we'd like to have the conversation again, but to document if there is we are somewhat leery of a 60-foot sign that may not be appropriate, a high sign.
Okay.
And my memory is that Casey's originally wanted to go higher for the partnership here in town that built that store.
Was that when it was when the Two Rivers Co-op eventually?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
they found out the higher you get, the more expensive that sign
Absolutely,
gets.
yeah.
And instead of 60 feet tall, they were happy with 40.
So we can expect policy or P&Z to wrestle this and come back.
If you get the direction tonight, our next meeting, Jerry's, was actually next Monday night.
Correct.
We'll have it on the work session at P&Z on both of these items next Monday night. Will be our first work session.
Anybody got anything else they want to say up here? All right, let's move on then. Use of the Second Christian Reformed Church property.
Okay. All right, Mr. Mayor, as the mayor and council are aware, we're scheduled to close on the remaining parcels on the Second Christian Reformed property. This is the property that just abuts the Pella Public Safety Complex. The police station is located over here. What you see up on the map are the green parcels, and those green parcels the city's already purchased from the church. We're set to close before November 1st of this year on the remaining parcels, which are the buildings, the blue parcel right here. And so we thought it would be just a good idea to touch base with the council and make sure that everyone's on the same page when we talk about immediately what the immediate plans are once the city takes possession of the property. We realize there's going to be additional work sessions on the future use of that parcel, and we anticipate significant dialogue on that in the future. But immediately, what we're planning on doing, unless directed otherwise by the city council, once we take possession of these buildings, is we're going to lock the buildings, block off the public access to those buildings that we have. And we're planning on the parking area currently we have up here, the northern parking lot. We're going to open up the Second Christian Reformed Church, where our recommendation would be to open up the remaining portion of the building right here for public parking and allow public parking on that parcel. But again, those buildings would be secure. And that would be the immediate plan of action, with the realization that we'll have future work sessions on future plans for the property.
Is the house vacant?
It's my understanding that's what they were using for their youth house, and so on it, so we believe it will be vacant by the time we inherit it.
Yeah, seems like a logical steps to take as soon as we take possession. We certainly don't want people going in either structure.
That parking area's really been busy since the one by town crier has been all torn up.
Absolutely, yes.
So are they're on schedule for November 1st?
We believe they are. We believe their last service is going to be right around that time, that late October, so we believe they're on target for that.
So I believe there's some asbestos mitigation we have to do too, right?
Yeah, I think, when we talk about future reuse of the property, asbestos in all buildings just go hand in hand, and that'd be the key consideration you would have to take a look at, future use of the property. But immediately, we'd have everything locked down.
Anyone disagree with the plan here? All right, yeah, we will have further discussion about what to actually do with it after we have it, I'm sure. So I want to remind everybody that we've moved, our next scheduled meeting was for November 2nd, that's election day. So our meeting is moved to the 1st, on Monday, the 1st, so that we don't interfere with election day. So just a reminder, keep that in mind. And then we're going to go into a closed session. Is anybody interested in staying until we come back out of that closed session? I don't think there will be any action taken out of our closed session. If not, I'm going to ask you all to leave, and we can have our closed session here. Otherwise, we can, if anyone is interested, because we're going to have the closed session, we're going to come out of the closed session, and we're going to adjourn. That's the plan. So, 0.91 to discuss marketing and pricing strategies or proprietary information on the city utility. If its competitive position would be harmed by public disclosure not required of potential or actual competitors, and if no public purpose would be served by such disclosure.
So moved.
Vanstra, Hopkins, discussion. All in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Vanstra.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Vanderhorst.
All right, I don't think there will be any motions coming out from our closed session, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Manstra's for. All in favor, please say yes. Opposed, no. Mandy, please call the roll.
Vanstra.
Yes.
Spore.
Yes.
DeYoung.
Yes.
Vanderhorst.
Yes.
Hopkins.
Yep.
We are adjourned.